name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and today another detailed forecast update coming your way. We're going to be talking about powerful storms moving across Tasmania and the southern states of Australia. We'll talk about blizzard conditions across Victoria and New South Wales, some rainfall far north Queensland and southwest and Western Australia, and we'll finish it off talking about a strong heatwave that's expected to develop across central Australia. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Your support is greatly appreciated. So we're going to start things off over in Tasmania. Again, the hot seat for severe weather across the nation. We've got some powerful storms that are still lining up the state right now. They've been lashed overnight by wind gusts up to 150 kilometres an hour down on Mount Cyclone Island and up at Gaffs Hill just in the Derwent Valley. It has been a wild one, that's for sure. Conditions have temporarily eased off a little bit. Temperatures in the low teens right now across parts of the state, so it is not too cold there. It's only the mountains that are still receiving those bitterly cold conditions, but you can see the rainfall and the intense wind has temporarily eased off, but that's not going to be around for much longer. You can see this cold front here in the Great Australian Bight. This one here is going to be lashing Tasmania from about the afternoon to evening hours onwards. Those winds will pick up from about 10 p.m. local time, especially across the northern and the west coasts. The rainfall will likely pick up just a few hours after said wind picks up. If the windy models ever want to load today, you can see we're still talking about some heavy rainfall that's going to be streaming in from this frontal system here. Now the pressures across Tasmania as well, the air pressures being really low, down towards the 980 hectopascals. That is very low, especially for Tasmania. We normally don't see this in any winter season, so we're expecting storm tides as well associated with the really big waves along the northern coast of Tasmania. So tonight into early tomorrow morning, along the high tide, expect coastal inundations up to 20 centimetres, about a foot higher than the high tide marker, because these coastal inundations, these waves, they're going to be high, they're going to be really big on top of the very low air pressures, which are going to be raising water levels across the Bass Strait and into parts of the Tasmanian coastline as well. Expect big tides, that's for sure. The rainfall and the strong winds will continue through early Friday morning into late Friday morning. The rainfall slowly easing off throughout Friday before turning into snow showers across the high peaks and across a lot of areas along the west coast by about Friday afternoon and evening. The winds are going to remain very strong as well across much of Tasmania right through Friday and into early Saturday morning. You can see peak wind gusts, again, if the models ever want to load today, peak wind gusts are expected to be sort of approaching that 100 to 110 kilometres an hour threshold along exposed coastal locations on the west coast and the south coast, and then inland averaging between 80 and 100 kilometres an hour. The north coast will likely be a little bit stronger than that, and then the King Island and Inferno Island sort of area in the Bass Strait, we're talking about wind gusts averaging between 80 and 110 kilometres an hour once again. In terms of rainfall as well, it looks like a secondary cold front sweeps up from the south late Friday night. This one's going to have some very strong winds in it as well. Expect wind gusts up to 140 kilometres an hour across parts of the south coast. I would not be surprised if Mount Cyclone Island was picking up nearly 100 mile an hour wind gusts at this time. That's 160 kilometres an hour late Friday night into early Saturday morning. Some really violent weather is going to sweep up then to close off winter by the looks of things. Snow will be very prevalent throughout the even low-lying areas throughout central Tasmania on Saturday morning and into the early afternoon hours, expecting snow down to about 600 or 700 metres, which is quite low for this time of the year, that's for sure. The rainfall continuing through Saturday as well. You can see not torrential rainfall, but pretty consistent moderate rainfall just sticking around for the central parts of Tasmania. And I think Saturday, I would not be surprised if we were seeing total rainfall accumulations up to 70 or 80 millimetres, just with how much rainfall is going to be streaming through and the consistency of it. I mean, we're talking about 10 millimetres an hour for what could be 8 to 10 hours at a time, and once you do the math on that, the rainfall accumulations, they sure do add up. The rainfall continuing through Saturday night into early Sunday morning. In fact, it could be heavy at times with thunderstorms possible along the west coast by Sunday morning. Some heavy falls also possible along the south coast and also in the northern parts of the state as well. We could be seeing some heavy rainfall around the sort of Launceston, Ben Lomond National Park sort of area. I would not be surprised if we saw some very heavy accumulations there. And then finally on Monday, the winds turn around to the southwest. You can see it here as these low pressure systems clear out. There will still be showers and strong winds throughout Monday, but it looks like the severe weather threat at least eases off by Monday afternoon, and the worst the weather passes through about Tuesday morning before a return to some calmer conditions on Tuesday afternoon, powered by a high pressure ridge that is going to establish itself over New South Wales and Victoria. A week of very surprising, intense severe weather. It seems like Tasmania, and I saw this in a comment yesterday, missed out on the really severe weather this winter season. I mean, they did get some good rainfall, especially along the west coast, but in terms of severe weather like we are seeing on the forecast today, it seems like they missed out in the winter, and they're getting an entire week's worth of winter weather, or an entire winter's worth of weather in 1 week by the looks of things. And that's exactly right. I mean, take a look at these wind accumulations here. Very strong wind gusts are expected to continue over the next week or so across Tasmania until about Tuesday. You can see peak wind gusts across the west coast averaging between 110 and 125 kilometres an hour. Mount Cyclone Island on the forecast up to 130 kilometres an hour. I reckon they'll get a stronger wind gust than that. I don't think 145 kilometres an hour, which is their strongest wind gust so far, I don't think that's going to be the end of their severe weather. Very strong winds throughout the Bass Strait as well. It is a bit of a question as to whether the Spirit of Tasmania will run, just considering how rough the seas are going to be through there, which is another point I'll touch on in just a second. Some strong winds as well expected through New South Wales and Victoria. I'll touch on that in just a couple of minutes. And you can see this big line of massive wind gusts up to 150 kilometres an hour. That's just where the core of the cold fronts is going to be moving through, and I would not be surprised if the equivalent wind gusts did land themselves over the high peaks across Tasmania. In short, any shore-based activity, any boating activity across Tasmania until about Wednesday next week, get it out of your head. It is completely off limits at this time. I've never seen a severe weather forecast this nasty for Tasmania in 6 years of tracking the weather models. Very significant winter weather coming through. Hiking as well, I advise against it unless you know exactly what you're doing and exactly where you're going, because again, there's going to be so much rainfall, potential for snow and sleet down to low elevations, huge wind gusts as well. Again, I just do not recommend hiking in weather like this. This is a good opportunity to spend a week indoors and out of the elements, because this severe weather is really nasty, that's for sure. Now, the rainfall accumulations have backed themselves down a little bit from yesterday's forecast. We're still talking about the potential for up to 180 millimetres around Lake St Clair, and then some of the higher elevations, especially around Mount Reid and Queenstown, we could be seeing up towards 150 to 180 millimetres, and the potential for up to 200 millimetres across the rainforest areas along the south coast around Strathgordon, and then down towards the southwest wilderness. Of some significant falls are expected down there. The Axis G3 model still calling for absolutely insane accumulations across the central parts of the state, a further 300 millimetres to fall until about Tuesday afternoon. Again, I think that's a very bullish forecast at this time, but it is not completely off the cards. And on top of the 150 millimetres that some locations have already picked up, you do the math on that, up to 500 millimetres of rainfall is possible from this weather event. Very significant accumulations indeed, but I think that is on the absolute upper edge of what is on the forecast, or what is possible from this weather event. Into the Derwent Valley as well, accumulations between 40 and 100 millimetres, especially once you get into the foothills of some of the mountains. Hobart expecting a measly 40 millimetres, but considering that's going to be pretty steady over the next couple of days, it will feel like a lot more than that, but that's pretty typical of Hobart weather. Launceston, I reckon, will pick up slightly more than 50 millimetres. I reckon they're in for at least 80 millimetres over the next 5 or 6 days. The bulk of that will come through Saturday and Sunday, I imagine, and then along the north coast as well, especially into the northeast, where the majority of the rainfall will come through Sunday and Monday, up to or between 50 to 100 millimetres possible over there. Any questions or comments about the rainfall, please do leave them in the comment section down below. If you've got any questions that I have left unanswered, then please do let me know in the comment section down below. Now for the wave forecast across the Tasmanian coastline and into the Bass Strait as well, we do have some high waves that are expected to continue throughout the course of today. However, they will be easing off. Friday as well, we're expecting some high waves to develop across the west coast, but it's going to be from Friday afternoon and into Saturday, where these big monster waves return to the west coast of Tasmania and into the Bass Strait as well. I mean, take a look at this. By Saturday night, we've got peak wave heights between that 10 and 11 metre mark across parts of the Southern Ocean. Huge wave heights expected. That's between 30 and 35 feet. Massive indeed. And they will be streaming into the west coast of Tasmania, likely to cause some significant coastal erosion in places along the west coast, and some big problems with the Spirit of Tasmania in the Bass Strait, where wave heights will likely be between 5 and 9 metres at times across parts of the Bass Strait. Very high indeed, with a pretty short wave period as well, which means it's going to be very choppy indeed across parts of the Bass Strait. So again, it is a bit of a question as to whether that Spirit of Tasmania will run. That can run through some pretty significant swells, that's for sure. However, I think 9 metres, I think any sea captain in the world will avoid waves like that, like the plague. There's certainly some big waves indeed expected from this cold front. However, I would not be surprised if they did still decide to push on from a weather event like this. It is significant, but again, it's not the worst that the Bass Strait has seen. They have a reputation for seeing some absolute monster waves, so about between 5 and 9 meters. It isn't anything crazy for them. In terms of snowfall as well, that's something that I'd also like to talk about across parts of Tasmania, and also in towards New South Wales and Victoria as well. There are some decent snowfall accumulations expected, especially across the high peaks of Tasmania, where between a further 70 to 90 centimeters of snow is possible. Between 30 and 50 of that could settle across parts of the high peaks, and maybe a little bit more into some higher valleys. Again, snowfall is expected down to about 500 or 600 meters across parts of central Tasmania. Might be a little bit higher into the northern parts of the state, just considering how warm the temperatures are starting to get across parts of Tasmania as well, with these cold fronts moving through. And we're not really seeing sub-zero temperatures, which means the snow is going to be pretty few and far between for elevations below 1,000 meters. But again, there is still the chance of snow down towards some of those lower elevations, and some good snow is also expected into the high peaks of New South Wales and Victoria too. You can see between 5 and 10 centimeters of snow expected there. The majority of that should settle, with a little bit more expected into the high valleys, but snowfall there will be reserved for locations above about 1,200 meters and about 1,400 meters into New South Wales, and there's really not going to be much of it coming through either. Most of it coming through Sunday night into Monday morning, and yet really not too much in the way of snow is expected there, unfortunately. For snow lovers in New South Wales and Victoria, nothing too crazy is expected. Let's go and show far north Queensland a little bit of love now before talking about southwest and Western Australia. There is some showers expected to develop into the middle parts of next week. You can see an onshore flow is expected to build across the Coral Sea from about Tuesday onwards, and then from Tuesday afternoon, showers will develop across the Daintree rainforest and then into the Cassowary coast as well, with some heavy falls possible, especially Wednesday morning and early afternoon, where totals up to 50 millimeters are possible to the 9 a.m. on Thursday. The showers continuing through Thursday and into Friday as well, before temporarily easing off by the looks of things for next weekend, Saturday the 7th of September. But just taking a look at this rainfall accumulation map up here, you can see just the big spread of rainfall that we are expecting over the next 10 days across parts of the far north, and some showers expected as far south as Rockhampton as well, with locations outside of Mackay and Airlie Beach expecting a couple of millimeters of rainfall too. Townsville also a few drops of rainfall, but it's going to be the Cassowary coast where up to 50 to 80 millimeters is possible, and then into the Daintree where between 70 and 100 millimeters of rainfall is possible for some locations. So some significant falls are certainly possible from this weather event here, and it certainly looks like the rainfall accumulations are going to start adding up from here on out for parts of the far north. It looks like the wet season is about to break any day now for parts of the far north of Queensland, and the rainfall will be piling on from here on out for the next couple of months, that's for sure. If you've got any questions or comments, or you'd like to share an opinion about the wet season, then please do let me know up in far north Queensland. I'd love to hear from you. The comments is what helps me make these videos a lot of the time. So again, their support, your commenters' support is much appreciated every time. Into the southwest of Western Australia as well, you can see on the rainfall accumulation map, there is a few drops of rainfall expected. There's really not much coming through now on the forecast. Again, still some rainfall is possible, but it is much, much lighter in comparison to what we've been seeing over recent weeks. What did take a few people off guard last night is a severe weather warning was issued, and that was for this cold front that's blown through in the last couple of hours. Damaging winds were reported across much of the southwest, and you can see winds right now up to 70 kilometers an hour across Cape Leeuwin, gusting up towards 100 kilometers an hour. They were actually quite strong, and I believe that took a lot of people by surprise. The winds will continue to steadily ease off throughout the course of today. The showers will still continue here and there, especially along the south coast, and maybe a few into the Perth metro area. Showers also possible tomorrow afternoon and Saturday morning, before a few days of dry weather is expected. Showers will pipe up again on Tuesday with a cold front that's expected to brush up against the south coast Tuesday afternoon and into the evening. Showers will continue through Wednesday morning, and then showers again piping up Thursday afternoon with the passage of another cold front Thursday afternoon and into Friday morning, which will likely bring the last significant rainfall accumulation to the south coast for this winter season. And then under the influence of high pressure systems, which are now expected to build pretty significantly. I mean, just take a look at the size of this one. It's going to be a lot more drier across parts of the southwest over the next sort of 3 or 4 weeks or so as we transition into the spring weather phase. In terms of peak rainfall accumulations, though, over the next 10 days, peak accumulations around Perth between 10 and 20 millimetres. The eastern suburbs will likely pick up a little bit more rainfall. Areas along the Darling Range down towards Harvey, Dwelling Up and Collie expecting between 30 and 40 millimetres, and then along the south coast as well, some decent falls expected there outside of Walpole and Manchma between 40 and 50 millimetres is possible. But again, nothing too crazy is expected. The rainfall really is starting to ease off, and building in its place is the temperatures. I mean, take a look at this. It's really starting to get orange and even into the reds, which is high 30s, low 40s across parts of Central Australia, with temperatures expected to soar above 40 degrees once again for parts of Western Australia, and it looks like these hot temperatures are here to stay. Another hot day tomorrow with temperatures up to 40 degrees outside of Birdsville and Alice Springs in the Northern Territory and Queensland. Very warm temperatures as well, low 30s along southeastern Queensland and high 20s across the New South Wales coastline. Sydney expecting a top of 27, which is just going to exacerbate their fire dangers, which is already apparently becoming a problem down there. Brisbane into the low 30s on Saturday, 33 there, and I believe slightly warmer on Sunday as well. Temperatures into the eastern suburbs of Brisbane expected to soar up towards 35 degrees, so very warm indeed, and a big swathe of above 35 degrees Celsius temperatures across central Queensland, the Northern Territory, and above 40 for parts of Western Australia on a Sunday. It's going to keep warming up through Monday and Tuesday as well next week into Western Australia. The cold front sweeping the heat across into South Australia and the Northern Territory next Wednesday, with temperatures up to 40 degrees are possible around Coober Pedy and Ceduna. Warm temperatures expected on Thursday as well to build in Western Australia, which will then get swept across the nation in another cold front on Friday and Saturday next week. So again, we're just going to be breaking down this forecast day by day in terms of temperatures across Central Australia, but I think what's very clear now is that this hot weather is here to stay. It's going to be staying for the next couple of months, in fact the next 7 months across parts of Central Australia. Just looks like winter has completely left parts of Central Australia, and it's going to be hot days and hot nights from here on out. That's the latest that I have today on the weather forecast. If I have left anything unanswered, then please do let me know in the comment section down below. I'll try and get back to as many people as I can throughout the course of today. Thank you so much for the support and the recent uploads. The support is fantastic and I cannot get enough of it. So thank you so much for all of the kind words and the likes and the subscribes and the shares as well. It is much appreciated. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now. I could not run this show without them. They're the reason I have access to all of this nice fancy software. So again, their support is greatly appreciated. I could not run this show without them, but that's all from me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.